Hello and welcome to our little nanopod, our monster pod extra about a horse that was not supposed to be in the field. It reminds me a little bit of Godfather 3, talking about Classic Causeway. Just when you thought he was out, they pulled him back in. And to talk about him, a man who got to see him in the flesh this winter, and a guest who's always a pleasure and really one of the most renowned podcasters himself in this entire space, from a lot of places. He is Jason Beem. How are things?
It's good to have you on. I thought the Godfather reference was going to be like they just shouldn't have been there, as opposed to the part 3 at least.
Yeah, you could make that argument. You could tie in the Godfather in many ways here in the 50th anniversary of that first film. But you know what? If I want to take a more positive view, you don't have to go very far back in Derby history, just 1 year, to look at a horse who absolutely bombed out inexplicably in his final prep for the Derby, who then ended up, after several months and some legal proceedings, winning the whole thing in Mandaloun. How serious of a contender is this Classic Causeway?
Well, I think what's the way I think about him is BFD and AFD, before the Florida Derby and after the Florida Derby. Because if you remember, I think it was pool 3, but he was 10-1 in the future pool after the Tampa Bay Derby win. And I remember Marty McGee and Jay Privman had him like 3rd in their rankings. I mean, he was pretty highly thought of, and there was a distinct possibility he would train up to the Kentucky Derby. And I would guess if he had done that, he's probably 15-1, 20-1 maybe in this race, as opposed to 30-1 plus that he's going to be on Saturday. And so you can't ignore the Florida Derby. It happened, and it was a terrible effort. But I know for the 2 races at Tampa, the big question for me on those 2 is kind of who did he beat, because none of them have really come back to do a ton. Major General ran all right, but he was a complete no-show in the Tampa Bay Derby. But both those races, I mean, when you're calling a race, obviously you're going horse by horse. And so there's a big chunk of those races you're not looking at the leader until really, maybe from the half mile pull in, you're really focusing on the top few. But he just always looked very comfortable every time I would get back to him. In both those races, I just thought he's going to be super tough. Whereas in the Florida Derby, he got pressed and, pressed by his brother in Simplification, who was under Simplification was just traveling so much better than he was the whole way. And he never looked a winner or, anything in that race. And he was really done by the 3/8 pull. So if you're willing to toss that race, then he becomes interesting, I think. But if you're not, he's very much a deserving long shot.
You brought up the key point to me, the who did he beat in the races you called down in Florida. Tampa Bay Derby, we've had 6 horses come back out of that race. No winners, 1 second, 1 third, pretty mediocre form. You go back to the Sam Davis, 10 horses to run back, only 1 winner, him next time. So really you're looking at, 9 that weren't him and no wins. So it's pretty ropey looking form, and they weren't overpowering efforts on the clock, which leads me to the idea that while he's not going to win the race, in my estimation, he's still a very interesting entrant in the race, insofar as what he does for the pace scenario. Now, especially that we have the draw in here. He's drawn out in the 17.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, you've got another horse that maybe was going to go for the lead, maybe was going to sit epicenter. With him now down in the 3 post, I feel like that might force their hand to have to go. And I think with Classic Causeway, you've got to figure they're showing up here to go to the front. And, it may just heat things up enough to set it up for the closers. That's how I'm seeing this. And I feel more confident that way with Classic Causeway in this race drawn outside than I would have otherwise. Does that sound like a reasonable hypothesis to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that got the most mention out of his 2 Tampa races was how brilliantly he starts. I mean, it's not that he busts the gate any faster than them. It's just his strides 1, 2, and 3. He's at full speed so fast. And I remember both the first race I was surprised by, because I was looking on the outside to Little Vic, who ended up pressing him in that Sam Davis. And I remember catching my eye going, who the hell's that sprinting out of the gate early? And it was him. And so if he finds himself in that position again, where he kind of, 4 or 5 strides out of the race is really out breaking everybody, I don't see how they don't try to go for the lead, but they also have to work over 16 paths or whatever if they want to get down to the rail at some point during that home stretch, which, that is a form of ground loss, right? I mean, you're not running straight. Yeah.
And it's all about, for me, just like efficiency And when you have to hit the gas,
Yeah.
we talked about this on the shows a lot, where there's sort of a finite amount of gas that you have, and you got to use some gas if you're going to get over. It's going to be very tough for him, but I still think, even though I don't like his chances, he's one of the most important entrants in the race in
Yeah.
terms of who's actually going to win the thing. And while I have you, I would be remiss in not exactly holding your feet to the fire this early in the week, but this early on, if you had to pick one horse you thought was going to win or run well in the Kentucky Derby, how do you want to answer that question? You could give me a short list. You could give me a horse who's caught your eye. What do you think?
I'm going to give you the horse that's caught my eye. Every time I look through the list, and the week leading up, it's like I'd see someone post a workout and go, "Oh, I forgot about that one. Oh, I forgot about that one." But the name I keep coming to every time I get to him, Simplification, just because I feel like he just keeps running decent races, and I know a lot of people are not in love with the Florida form or that, this year. And obviously it's a circuit that's had success in recent years in the Derby. But every time I come back to him, I just think, he always runs pretty good races, and he's going to be a big price. And I don't, Epicenter and Zandon, I just don't know how either of them have done enough in my book to be 3-1. They just don't seem that far ahead of. I mean, I was shocked. I talked to Travis last week, and I said, this isn't a race with a 3-1 or 7-2 favorite, right? Like, this is going to be 4-1 or 9-2. And I still think that will be the case. I just don't see them as, Justify and horses like that really put away everybody leading into their races. I kind of get, but we'll see.
You bring up a lot of really good points, not the least of which is Simplification as a potentially interesting long shot, just again on the way that this race is going to be run. He is a runner who, if I was just looking at this, you study this race for so long, you can make yourself crazy. And Simplification had not been on my radar, but looking at these PPs fresh, especially with a pace map, you can make the case he's got the speed to get into position, and he's got some finish, and he'll be positioned ahead of those deeper closers. And most important of all, is going to be an absolutely wild price. You get to feel smart for a minute if you pick him, and he runs well. And then you make a great point about the morning line as well. And I feel for morning line makers. I was very critical on him after your show. Yeah, you know how hard
I've turned that job down 3 times in my life, and I'm going to continue to turn it down.
It's so thankless. But
Yeah.
I was critical on Matt's show, but I will say this: I think you feel pressure in a race like the Kentucky Derby to make a call, and I think that's why that decision was made to have 3-1 and 7-2. I cannot see that happening on the day. We shall see. We're going to learn.
Well, and Mattress Mac factor too, right? Like
that's right.
He can,
that could make a horse that would have been 7-2, 3-1 favorite.
Yeah.
It's a great point. Do we know? Has he said who he is betting on definitively?
I was told one of the two.
Oh my goodness! Because in the past he's just bet on the favorite, and we've been able to, guess that was going to be essential quality or whatever. But yeah, we shall see what our man in Texas decides to do. But in any case, Jason, such a pleasure having you here on these airwaves today, and we'll have you back soon. And if you're ever really hard up for a guest, I know.
Yeah. Well, good. And I've had a couple of those people on.
Good stuff, my friend. Always a pleasure. We'll be chatting soon.
Thanks, Pete.